we can begin on what promises to be a reasonably short meeting this evening. So obviously this is the Audit Committee for our March meeting, and we again have apologies from Councillor Stewart, so I am chairing.
Chair, sorry, I've also had apologies from Councillor Capozzi.
Okay, thank you. So I think that covers agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Then we have declarations of interest. Do we have any? No. And minutes and actions. So we've seen the minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments? Are we happy to sign those?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, public participation. We have none, which brings us on to our first and only agenda item for the evening, which is the Internal Controls and Assurance Report. We're coming directly to you, Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to endeavour not to keep you for too long tonight. So we have 3 reports to present, and I will say up front that none of them are particularly concerning in the nature of what is in them. However, there are some areas I would probably want to draw your attention to, and potentially some talking points. So I will talk through them. I will talk through all 3 of them, and then we'll invite questions at the end in an ad hoc kind of fashion. And hopefully we can that way make our way through things as quickly as possible. After I talk through the reports, though, I would like to go to the other sections of the progress report, because I think it's important to do that because we're coming up to the year end. So I will start on page 11 of the document that's in front of you, which is the income, cash and bank review. There is just one routine recommendation here. I don't propose to talk through it in any detail, given that it is a routine recommendation. However, the nature of the recommendation is essentially in relation to an update to a policy stroke procedure. And at that point, I will move on to the next report. The next one is recruitment and training. This is a reasonable level of assurance that's provided. There was some discussion between myself and management about whether it should be reasonable or substantial. I stuck with reasonable. However, I do believe it's towards the upper end of reasonable. There are 3 recommendations in total. 1 of them is flagged as an important, and 2 are what we've identified as priority 3 recommendations. There are 2 of those that I would draw your attention to. The first is the priority 2, which, although that's flagged as a priority 2, actually it's towards the lower end of priority 2, and essentially that is about KPIs in relation to job vacancies. I don't have a particular concern in relation to this, and I'm sure that management will action this, and indeed the responsible officer is here tonight. However, the other recommendation that I would draw your attention to is the priority 3 recommendation, which is about training on recruitment. And although this is flagged as a priority 3 recommendation, the inverse to what I said before is true, which is this is at the upper end of a priority 3 recommendation. So there is a record in effect in place to support that training is taking place. However, it doesn't link back to who has actually taken the training or the nature of the training that they have had provided to them. I think, broadly speaking, I'm not overly concerned about that. However, I do sit here and I'm aware of situations that have occurred in quite public fashion in relation to individuals who've been appointed to organisations in the public sector who should not have been. And it's very easy after something has occurred that's wrong to look back and say, well, how did this come to pass? Were the controls in place? And then you look at these things in an entirely different fashion. For example, Brent, which is not so far away, a public sector organisation managed to appoint somebody on £1,000 a day who had previously had a conviction for assault with a deadly weapon at a convenience store, albeit at a younger age. That individual was sacked. But obviously it led to a report in relation to how come they were recruited, and obviously like a little bit further back in time with the Savile report that came out from Leeds, and that made a load of recommendations about the importance of recruitment. So although this is flagged as a priority 3 recommendation, I personally don't think it's one that you should take too lightly, and indeed management have provided a recommendation response by June 2025, and that's one that we would anticipate receiving evidence for, although we wouldn't typically receive detailed evidence in respect to Priority 3. This is one that I would push to do so. And I will, with that, move on to the third report, which is financial resilience. And this is one that we audit year in, year out. This has no recommendations as such, but however, I would like to draw your attention to the narrative that's provided within the key strategic findings section, where we say that although everything kind of like happened that we would have expected to have happened for this year, in that additional income was provided, the organisation is moving to a place where savings will have to be made. And indeed, the organisation already has a raft of actions in hand in order to support the cost improvement section of what we would typically see in an organisation of this nature. And I've had detailed discussions with the section 151 in relation to those. So I'm happy that things are taking place in relation to that, but that is an audit that we would look to undertake again the following year for obvious reasons. And that is all I have to say about the reports that have been undertaken. I await questions, concerns, challenge. Over to yourselves.
Thanks, Philip. Welcome, Prateen. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to invite questions on agenda item 2 first. Try to flush out anything on that. Do we have? Oh, no comments?
No comment.
Oh,
Sorry, we
Yes, we ask questions.
sorry, I'm looking at it on whatever it is. I've forgotten. Never mind. On ModGov, so I haven't quite got the agenda items.
Oh, okay. So we've only got one
sorry.
agenda item, but basically it's on the HR.
I know where it is.
Yeah.
So it's okay. I was going to say that it's good to see Pretty here, and thank you for coming, because we don't always get the relevant managers here. Do you have any response or any comments that you'd like to make to the recommendations and the comments that have been made by the auditors?
I think the first two recommendations that I've made, they're quite easy for us to kind of overcome and kind of provide some sort of evidence. I think we do already provide a vacancy report and do some recording. I think it's just a case of formalising that process so that if anyone was to leave the organisation, there is a process there that will be consistent, I think, moving forward. So we're going to include that as part of our recruitment code of practice, to say that there is that element of reporting that takes place with SLT, and this is how the report should be created, etc. And the minor kind of suggestion with regards to employment policies, we have already updated that and put that onto our intranet as well to say when it's going to be next reviewed, which will be April 2026. And earlier last year, we had appointed an OD manager, Stacey Young, who's going to be looking after all our training. And part of the training that's going to be rolled out in the summertime is an Inspire program, which is for all managers to go on this program, past and present managers and future managers as well. And there's going to be a recruitment and training module that's specifically guided towards the recruitment process. So they will be trained up on there, and that'll be recorded more formally, as well as having some refresher training for managers who may be in the organisation for a longer period of time and just need to have a refresher session put into place every 2 years or every 3 years, just so that they're reminded of any updates that happen, any changes that happen to legislation, any changes that happen to our processes.
If I may, it's a bit of a tangential question. Do you do exit interviews?
We do. They're not mandatory, but they are offered. And we do actually include, as part of the acknowledgement letter when we receive a resignation, that there is a SurveyMonkey kind of link that you can go onto if you wish to do so. And we also encourage managers to talk to the person as well, to say that, look, I know that you're leaving. Would you like to have a chat either with managers, head of service, or with HR, just to provide some feedback as to why you're exiting the organisation, etc.
Thank you. So from my point, I'm very glad to see some deep questioning going on this area. Obviously, we've gone for quite a long period where recruitment was an issue for us. So whilst, according to the update reports we've had the last couple of FNRs, we have not been having that as a concern recently. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to go away. So I'm very glad that we've had a deep dive into it. Me just sticking my own suggestions based on my day job, which again isn't HR, so I really shouldn't. But in regards to recommendation 3, I was going to suggest that we actually have a separate policy called induction. The reason being, again, I'm quite cynical, but quite often you tell people what their responsibilities are when it comes to recruitment, but then basically once they've got the contract, they sort of think, okay, I'm done. If you've sort of got another policy adjunct to it, which has induction listed there, so all line managers know they are responsible for the induction, have all the exact same suggestions here, it just happens to be in something else, so that line manager knows categorically it's up to them to make sure that happens once the person starts.
Sure.
You triggered a thought in my mind, because you mentioned recruitment and been some difficulties. I was at Cabinet last night where reference was made in one of the papers to the about £250,000 pressure on recruitment for and vacancies in the Clean, Safe and Green and the Waste Collection Service. Can I ask, is that still a relevant problem, or has that been resolved now?
It's still relevant. I mean, it's still areas that we find difficult to recruit in, and the service area do rely heavily on agency staff as well within those areas, just to cover gaps. Purely because, you know, you might get a call from someone who said they can't come into work at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, having to get agency person on, but then we do get a high level of sickness within that area. So, you know, that one day agency staff might then turn into a couple of weeks, couple of months, depending on the nature of why they've been called in the first place. And
sorry, I misrepresented what I was trying to say, actually. Sorry, it's my fault. It was actually in the servicing of the vehicles.
Oh, okay. So
and mechanics, if you like. And,
the fleet services.
And we were having to hire in replacement vehicles and things like that, I think.
So recruiting for people within the fleet services,
yeah.
Again, it is a challenging area to recruit within. So we're not heavily that reliant on agencies, but we tend to get people in that are attempt to perms rather than being able to recruit directly, as we have been for most of our other vacancies. You know, we can advertise those vacancies, get applicants coming in. For the fleet services, it has to be a bit more bespoke, and sometimes we do have to rely on agencies to bring in the staff initially for an introduction before we decide to take them on.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on report 2? Okay, well, thank you very much. You're very welcome to remain, and you can throw your opinions on our cash and bank responses. But otherwise, if you
I may not have much of a valuable input, I'm afraid.
if you want to run on, I very much understand.
No worries. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. So coming back to report 1, the substantial assurance for cash and bank. Do you have any questions or comments? No? Okay, and then I will then move on to report 3. And do we have questions or comments on the key findings here? Question for me, especially because it did sort of pop up at full council. I just want to make sure, while obviously I agree with your contextual comments on the future sides, I do want to make sure, though, that the scope of your review at the moment, you are looking over the period of the MTFS, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to think that our various ways of forecasting means that we are quite confident. We're confident that all other things being equal, we're not expecting to have to take major steps away from the MTFS, but obviously the MTFS only lasts us for 3 years. So we sort of know there needs to be gradual steps. But I just want to make sure that the context, that you're not sort of focusing on the immediate financial statements and saying the future is alarming.
So it depends. So if you, for example, were to achieve your current strategy of net zero to kind of move on to the next stage, then I would suggest that, yeah, you would be financially challenged if you were to achieve your carbon targets, etc., etc. However, I think the more likely trajectory of this council is clearly understood by everyone involved. And if I were to line up the councils that I'm involved in and talk about the extent to which I am concerned about the underlying finances, this would definitely be one of the councils that I'm least concerned about. I feel it's very well managed. I feel that the financial position is sound and clearly understood. I feel that there are mature discussions across the political parties in relation to strategy, and I think that the interaction between councillors and the executive team is very good. That isn't the case in every council I have worked at, and I think that I'm very happy overall with the way that the projections are being undertaken, kicked around, and that the organisation is thinking about, for example, commercial income and the commercial approach, without at the same time necessarily embarking upon, I don't know, enormous skyscrapers, for example. So to take an example from not so far away. So yeah, I'm generally happy.
Okay. Terry, Graham, any comments from yourselves?
No.
Okay. I was hoping we could squeeze a little bit out of that one, but again, it's green, so well done to Claire and team. Okay. Philip, you wanted to talk about the work plan going forward and the follow-up on some of the other items.
So if I could move to page 18 of the document, which is the progress against the annual plan, I think it's really germane to talk about this at this point in the year, because typically it is an area that requires focus, and it's just worth highlighting first that we're on track to deliver all the audits by the year end or there or thereabouts. But secondly, that there are no audits that have been deferred or cancelled or like that, just sitting there without any projected start date having occurred. That being said, there is a possibility of delay by 1 or 2 weeks, which might drift into early April for at least one of the audits that are down there. I did want to have a discussion with Section 151 on that tonight, but unfortunately he's not about, but I'll pick that up with him tomorrow. And I'm not sure what his view is going to be in relation to that. But generally, really happy with progress in relation to the plan that's been identified here. Again, this would be a council that sits towards the front end of supporting audit, getting the audit work delivered on a timely basis. The organisation pushes back when individual officers suggest they want their audits pushed back towards the end of the year, which is something that we hear quite often, and that is really helpful. And I would like to kind of like formally record thanks from internal auditors for the engagement from the organisation at large to support these audits being undertaken. You know, no one ever really wants to have an internal audit descend upon them, but nevertheless, all the officers that I've worked with in this organisation have engaged with us fully, and have, you know, we're invited to do so, have come to the committee and talked about the reports that have been presented in an open fashion, which I feel is really positive. You know, supports an open culture, which is what you want.
Thank you very much. Trudy, I'm going to pass on to you to convey that, because obviously that's going to affect a number of offices outside of the finance department, because these audits are touching a lot of teams. So that's great feedback to hear.
And if I can move on to the follow-up section, which starts on page 21, you don't need to pay particular attention to this. So this is just to give you formal notification of the recommendations that remain outstanding as we run towards the year end. I anticipate that this number of recommendations will come down, but it is worth just highlighting that 3 of the recommendations we have effectively been asked for a deferral of the date that was originally raised. And I'm highlighting that all 3 of those are climate change. I don't believe that was particularly difficult to anticipate that those dates were likely to have been pushed back. I'm actually quite supportive of the pushback of dates in relation to that. I think that's an entirely reasonable thing to do, but worth noting, and obviously needs approval from the Audit Committee in respect of those dates being pushed back, because effectively when the report came to you, one set of dates were suggested, and instead a different set of dates are being put forward. It's also worth highlighting that I expect the number of recommendations will go down as we hit year end, and I will be surprised if that number sits above 6.
Okay. But of note, all of those dates are to be 30th of June 2025. So one would hope that we have progress against them already. I don't know if Claire, you're able to comment on that.
I can't, but I can take it away and I'll make sure with the service that they are working on it.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say in relation to the presentation of this report, I'm afraid. So I didn't quite manage to make the 25 too, but...
Okay, do we have any comments from the committee before acceptance of the report?
I think one comment, without sort of bigging us up too much, is that over the number of years that certainly I've been involved with the Audit Committee, I've always felt that we've been very open with the officers, but at the same time we've also been rigorous and robust if we needed to be with officers, and I think that's engendered the culture that we have a passion for what we do, but hopefully we know what we're doing in terms of holding officers to account, and indeed holding yourselves to account as well in that context. So I think that's something, when you read sometimes details of other authorities, perhaps they're not quite as robust.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think, for what it's worth, and I say this without fear or favour, is that this Audit Committee actually is like a very good Audit Committee to provide services to. I've really enjoyed providing services to this committee. I like the fact that you largely leave politics at the door, that you give a thorough airing to things and encourage an open culture, but do provide challenge. You know, typically I provide 1 or 2 limited assurance audit reports a year. Where that happens, this Audit Committee has got an entirely reasonable approach in respect of those people. You know, you say, how can we support you? We need to achieve these targets. What can we do? Like that's a great attitude to have, and yeah, I've really enjoyed working with you. So thanks.
Thank you. I'm slightly worried that you're putting that in the past tense, and obviously we knew last time that we were coming with the audit contract. Am I inferring that there's been a decision on that? No, not. Okay.
No, it's just in case I don't see you again.
It's just maybe I've been having too much inferring of things from my wife, but I was just slightly worried about the tense that was used there.
We're hoping it's a good decision.
We're
A good decision.
We're hoping, but if not, I really did want to provide that feedback. I really think this is an excellent Audit Committee.
Thank you very much. I'll say thank you on behalf of the committee, even though I am only acting chair. Obviously, the audit committee does have a key role in the process and sort of communicating priorities through to the SLT via this channel. But I suspect that the reason why most of the audits are going smoothly is that we've got a senior leadership team, obviously quite a few haven't been in post for too long, which means you've probably got a lot more uniformity of objectives. If everybody's trying to achieve the same things, the measurements to go towards those same things generally will be a bit smoother than when you've got sort of some people that sort of believe in one set of goals and other people that have other sets of goals. Okay. Do we have any further comments, or will we be in a position to close the meeting?
I've just got an update on the strategic risk from Nigel.
Okay.
So just to let in, sort of following on from like where we are with the strategic risk plan. So obviously the council approved the new 24 to 28 corporate plan at the end of 2024. So as such, we're reviewing all our strategic risks. In February, Cabinet and leaders of parties underwent some risk management presentation to bring members up to speed with risk management practices. And then in March, Cabinet, Audit chairs and leaders were all invited to a strategic risk workshop. So to focus on what strategic risks are around that delivery of that corporate plan. And then sort of the next steps are during March and April, we'll take them workshop outputs, review them with officers, portfolio holders, and come up with a sort of a new list of strategic risks which we'll bring back to Audit Committee.
Okay, just back up for a second. With regards to the selection of those strategic risks, because it sounds like we've got our list that we've been discussing, and it sounds like some are coming through with subset. Who's controlling what that subset is?
So what they'll do is they'll take away the feedback from that workshop with the list of, and then they'll come with proposed new ones for Audit to review, give their recommendations to. As I say, Cabinet members, leaders, portfolio holders have all been involved in them discussions, so there is.
Okay, it's fine. This is personal comment from me, is, so I don't know if other people will agree, but where we are replacing something that we've identified as a risk, can we please have a response from, I suggest it would be senior leadership team, that basically agrees and justifies why it's a risk that can come off. So I don't mind the change of focus.
And why.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's fine, no problem. I'll take that away and make sure that's included.
Thanks. Sorry, I just realised I've been calling people by first names. Councillor Sybil.
Right, okay. This emission report should be published in summer 2024. Shall we expect it the 30th of June?
Yes, so that's on the recommendations that we made on that report. So the point at which those recommendations will be achieved has been pushed back a little bit. That's all that means. So yeah, so you will get an update at that date.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, and then just a very minor one between yourselves and Trudy, if possible. The last couple of packs from you, we've had different page orientations, and obviously most of us are viewing the document on our machines generally via the intranet side. If there's any possibility to try to work either to use a different viewer or to make sure the orientation is all the same. I know it's minor, it's a
I will liaise with Trudy. I do believe there is something that we can do between us in order to try and support that. Thanks.
I did try and get them to flip the other way, but when I actually published them, they went back to the original way. So we'll have a little play and see.
Yeah, it's I mean, I don't really mind which way round it goes. And the only reason why I found this one particularly difficult is because there were a couple of ones where we had quite detailed amounts in the management response column, and when that was up the wrong way, I was having difficulty reading it. But yeah, it's minor. It's just a thing on the viewing.
I think there's a curiosity actually, because I'm looking at it on ModGov, and it's the wrong orientation. But I think I haven't got a rotate button either on ModGov. But if you look at it on the council papers, effectively, not ModGov, there is a rotate button, so you can rotate it. So there's something. It's probably I don't know what it is, but it's something curious.
You can export it as a PDF and then try to do the previous ones. I've done that, creating the PDF and doing the rotation as needed, but I just sort of found that trying to read these ones quickly.
There are some options available at our end, and I believe there probably are at your end as well. So we'll have a conversation and work out the best way forward.
Thanks. Okay, with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.